week at the oldest playbook. This is a concert series, and we're talking about the Book of Esther. I am surprised by this book. For those of you who are new to the oldest playbook, acronym is TOP, top. We look at the Bible, which is the oldest playbook. We endearingly call it the oldest playbook. And my job here with you is to spend time and decode the oldest playbook from the perspective of a founder, a business operator, and a builder. Okay. We all have different identities, but we're all doing business. And I just wanted to be helpful to you guys. Just very, very quickly, what authority do I have to be doing this? Well, I would say we have multiple identities that we all carry, right? Two of these very strong identities I carry is on the one hand, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 plus years. Today, I'm the venture capitalist who hates most venture capitalists. I say that very endearingly, okay? I don't actually hate people. It's just a way of making a statement to say that I don't think normally. I'm very contrarian in my thinking. So I am an investor by day. And one of the things, my other identity that makes me extremely effective in doing this job that I'm doing for you is I am a theologian. I am a master's in divinity student at the Fuller Theological Seminary. So I've been studying the Bible all my life, practically, as far as I can remember. I've been a skeptic, I've been a doubter, I've been a believer, I've been all over the place. And I'm a student of philosophy. I'm a student of many things. That's what makes me qualified for those of you who are curious, like, what does David? Is it just his opinions? No, I do believe that I come with a specific objective authority into this, right? Both business and theology. So here we are. Let me give you a little recap on what we talked about last week. We were covering the story of Esther, and this week it opens at the same place. Now, here's a recap, okay? Um, so, in the book of Esther, Esther is an orphan. She's an immigrant, right? And her ethnicity is makes her very, very a target in this kingdom of Persia, right? She's been conscripted into a pageant that she didn't even volunteer for. Her cousin Mordecai won't bow down to a man named Haman, and Haman's pissed off. He signs a royal decree that says, kill all Jews. And Mordecai tells Esther, hey, it's you. It's your job to come and save our people. She fasts for 3 days and then says the line, if I die, I die. If I perish, I perish. That's the recap. Okay. And that's where we left off with her. And we're about to walk in with her into the throne room. So if I perish, I perish. The reason that line came up is because her husband, though she's the queen of Persia, her husband, the king of Persia, is a very, very unpredictable man. His temperament is just ah. So she can walk into his throne room, and if he's pissed off, he can tell her, "Why are you here? Why are you bothering me? Get out! Oh, kill her off with her head." Because that has happened before. He killed his previous queen. But if he's in a good mood, he'll do what? He'll extend his royal scepter, and that is a sign of mercy, and that is a sign of welcoming. In fact, that is a sign of, I will give you what you want. Come here. You found my favor. So she's gambling. It's 50-50. She can go into the throne room and she might die. So she says, if I perish, I perish. So that's where she is. So tonight, just to kind of spoiler alert, she wins. Okay. She completely wins. It's a total reversal of states. Hammond actually is the one that dies. But what I want to unpack for you guys is that the business lessons through this. It's actually quite incredible. As I was restudying this part of Esther, we're going to look at Esther chapters 5 through 10. We're going to go through each and highlight some of the key points. There's some invaluable business lessons here, guys. All right, let's just get into it, okay? I'm going to go over everything in about 4 movements. The first movement is that Esther got a blank check from the king. She got a blank check. She refuses it, not once, but twice. Let's get into this, okay? So, chapter 5, verse 1, third day of fasting. She puts on her royal robes, and what does she do? She goes to the inner court to talk to her husband, the king. Verse 2, King sees her. She wins favor. He extends the golden scepter, and so she's alive. She lives. So, this is an adrenaline filled moment, right? Because she's holding her breath, probably. She could have died, but boom, she's alive. It's like the longest 30 seconds of her life, probably. And he says, to his delight, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given you, even to the half of my kingdom. This is a blank check from the most powerful man on earth at the time, right? Wealthiest and most powerful man. And it's in that moment, everything she has risked to get that point, okay? Get to that point, she has risked everything. And what's top of mind for her is probably to save her people, right? That's what her Mordecai talked about. But what does she ask for? She asks, come to dinner. She asks him to come to dinner, and that's it. That's the ask. Um, verse 4, come to the banquet today, you and Haman. She invites the man to who's trying to kill her as well and says, come on over. And she says, uh, and when he's there, she says, come to dinner again. The thing is that she invites him to dinner once, he's happy. And then so he doubles down and says, what do you want? She's like, come to dinner again. The most powerful man on earth offers her half an empire twice, and she books two dinner reservations. This, I have to pause here. Warren Buffett, perhaps one of the wealthiest men on earth, he's famous for offering a meal with him, right? I don't know if it's lunch or dinner, but a meal with him, and he auctions it out, and people pay hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to have a meal with this man. And I haven't met a single person who pays that money and says, yeah, that meal was a waste. Most people who eat with Warren Buffett say, oh, that was good. It reminds me of this, right? Instead of asking for half the kingdom or saving her people, she says, hey, come to dinner. I don't think she was saying, oh, you know what? Dinner is the purpose. She had something better in mind. She was being very, very wise. He offers what? Three different times. He offers three times in this book, right? 5, 3, 5, 6, and 7, 2. These are the chapters. Chapter 5, verse 3, chapter 5, verse 6, chapter 7, verse 2. And she only answers on the third request what she wants. Okay, now let me unpack this. What does this mean? I know I kind of distracted you with the whole Warren Buffett thing. Um, what I wanted to say with the Warren Buffett example is that sometimes, guys, meals are more precious than asking for money. And what I'm about to make, the point, the founder perspective is related to this. Um, the mistake I see most often is that not that people fail to ask for something, it's that they ask the second someone gets excited. Okay. The investor who says, this is amazing. Send me your docs, right? I want to work with you. Come on. Enthusiasm, however, is not authority. And a yes given in a good mood gets relitigated again. Have you ever had that happen to you? They make a decision at the height of their enthusiasm, like in the moment, and then they later change their mind. I've had that happen to me a few times. In fact, I've noticed that even within my own heart, a verbal, oh wow, I'm so excited about this. And then I walk away and I sleep on it a little bit and I realize, wait, perhaps I was being too rash. That happens to founders a lot. That happens in business a lot, right? When in the moment of the heat of the moment, someone enthusiastically gives you an offer, you could respond by saying yes. And I think that's a noob move. And Esther is not a noob here. Instead of just accepting, what does she do? She says, well, no, no, just come back to dinner. She's waiting. She's patient. Okay, she wasn't reading the offer. I'm going into movement two. She was reading the man. Okay, look, the offer itself is a blank check and it's so attractive, it's undeniable. But she wasn't reading the offer. You don't just listen to somebody, founders, based on what they say. The words that come out of a person's mouth, I don't care how trustworthy that person is, words are cheap. You want to read the what? The person. Esther was reading the man. You need to be able to read the person. And you see this here. So why did you wait? The Bible, the scripture, the oldest playbook doesn't say why she waited, which means anyone who tells you that they know why she waited, they're full of crap, right? But here's the read I get, okay? Esther isn't evaluating the offer again. She's evaluating the person, the temperament of this person. And what does she know about the king? He's an enormously emotional person, that his entire operating system is just always at like a fluctuating flunk. Chapter one, what he throws a 6 month party, he gets drunk, summons his queen to show her off. She declines. He gets pissed off, removes her from his court because his feelings were what? Hurt in front of his guests. He's a prideful person. That volatility is the reason he might kill Esther too, right? She's not an idiot. She sees precedence. It's also the reason he just offered her half the empire over a drink. You see that? She knows the man. The thing that makes him lethal is the same thing that makes him generous. She is trying not to um, avoid his temperament. She's trying to time it. Okay. Um, and here's a read on the dinner. If we think about this, this man has been drinking on an empty stomach, perhaps like for hours, for a very long time. He's tired. He's hungry, and at this exact second, feeling extremely good about himself, right, for being merciful. Just golden scepter. I'm merciful. A promise extracted from a man in that state is worth exactly what it cost him. Nothing. Guys, if it costs a person nothing to get to that point, they don't really see the value of it. There's a saying. You know why they have men, they say, and my dad told me this. Why is it that, in a very kind of traditional um, process, men, before they get married, propose to a woman and they put in what, 2, 3 months worth of their salary to buy an engagement ring, right, to propose. Um, they say it's because men have these like fleeting temperaments, but when you put that kind of resource and money, that pain of saving up and putting your hard earned, like flesh, hard earned sweat, blood, cash to buy this ring, and you give it to your beloved, it costs you a lot. It's a physical, tangible reminder of what this is costing you. Of course, it costs way more than that, right? There's no price to what you could put on love between two people. But that's a kind of a physical embodiment of the kind of sacrifice and pain that goes into this process. And because he paid so much for it, you know, he's not gonna cheapen this relationship, is what my dad told me. And I think there's some truth to it. There's some truth to it. You appreciate what you fight for, right? You appreciate what you fight for. And the same is true in business, right? In business, if an offer didn't take me much to make to you, then I don't really appreciate your yes either. There's got to be this fight. And I'm not saying this is mandatory. I'm just saying if you read the room and read the person, not just a verbal deal, you'll know what to do. You'll know how to wait, or you'll know when to say yes. Now, the thing that matters most to everyone in here, okay? Um, every one of you have a machine that you use on your phone or on your computer. Uh, it's AI, right? And AI gives you instant answers. Um, it just goes fast. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you that's bad. It's not. I use it a lot to discuss and brainstorm. But notice what it did to the market, artificial intelligence. It made answers cheap, super cheap, nearly free, right? And when answers get free, the entire game moves for timing, right? You can prompt your way to perfect emails. You cannot prompt your way to knowing that it's Tuesday, he's exhausted, and he hasn't eaten. Those things you cannot get AI to figure out, right? That's timing. So knowledge is something you can acquire. Wisdom is something somebody has to become. And Esther had no information advantage about the king, right? If you look at chapter 5, she had zero. Everyone in that room knows the exact same facts, right? Hammond knows it, the eunuchs, all the court attendants. But she has one thing. She knew the person, and she had self-control to read the room and to wait. So what I'm trying to unpack here, guys, simply is this, is that when things are cheap, like the AI, right? What things are so cheap, when I give you a quick response, or if I put up a website, now web designers and web making a website, people pay nothing for it now. Why? Because it comes so fast. So cheap. When that happens, what requires time of people is what is given values. That's why what plumbers, general contractors, these manual labor type businesses are suddenly having a boom, right? They're making money because what? Time, input, and the benefits out of that has shifted. And AI is a proof of that. And that's exactly what's going on here, the Esther psychology. Moving on to the third B here, okay? Chapter six, this is interesting. In chapter six, some scholars say chapter six is a joke. They don't know why it's here. But Adele Berlin, uh, who wrote the Jewish Publication Society commentary, reads this book, and calls it a farce. Deliberately written to be funny, is what she says. So serious scholars think chapter six is a joke. But I don't think it's a joke, guys. The reason chapter six they think is a joke is it just seems so coincidentally opportune, and it just seems kind of random, yet so coincidentally opportune that it's here. So here's what happens. No reason is given, but for whatever that night, okay, it says the king could not sleep. That's how it starts. And so he commands somebody to bring the chronicles, like as a history, and read off of it, right? So somebody is coming out reading it, and as he's reading it, it's just kind of going over what's happened during his reign and the different things that happened. And he happens upon the part where Mordecai saved his life, prevented an assassination, and he forgot to reward this person. So that comes out in the Chronicles like, oh, what did I reward this guy? And just as he's doing this, Haman, the guy who wants to kill all the Jews, the enemy of Mordecai, comes in at that exact hour. He's walking through the courts, and so the king says, hey, come on over. And the king says the following in verse 6. What should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman says to himself, whom would the king delight to honor more than me? That's what he thinks, okay? So, look, the king is asking Haman for advice about what should I do? And Haman, in his arrogance, is thinking, oh, the king's asking because he's thinking about what to give me. And so Haman just goes off about, hey, you need to parade this guy in the streets, really recognize him, give him the royal robes, and just give him the noble prince to lead the horses through the square and shout that this man has got the king's honor. And after Haman says that, King says, great idea. I love it. Let's execute that. And to Haman's surprise, the king gives it to Mordecai, right? So why is this so funny? It's like the perfect setup. So Esther, mind you, up until this point, she's patiently waiting. Okay, so she invited the king to dinner twice. The third asks from the king before she says yes and tells the king what she wants. Between that, the second dinner and the third dinner is chapter six. And you have to ask yourself why this chapter six is so coincidentally opportune. It's because, I mean, this is when Mordecai suddenly gets elevated out of nowhere. It's like the stars have aligned. Look, chapter six might not have happened and moved on. And what would have happened then is Mordecai would have still been this obscure person, right? But this is like double whammy, sweet justice happening here. Mordecai suddenly gets back into the king's orbit, and then the third ask happens from the king. What can I give you? I'll give you half my kingdom type of ask to Esther. Um, Esther could not have planned that, right? There's no mention of God, guys, in the entire book of Esther. This is the one Hebrew book in the entire scripture where there's not a single mention of a supernatural God. But chapter 6 happens. And here's what I want to say, guys. Oftentimes, Professor uh, David David Strauss. He's a law professor, Professor David Strauss at the University of Chicago Law School. He said something really interesting, and I'll never forget. There's a lot of things that your professors say throughout your life, right? Your teachers. And David Strauss said something that I recall and I think about from day sometimes time. He said, guys, you'd be surprised at how much luck and fortune plays a role in your life success. And I won't forget that. He talked about that as though, your intelligence, you can prepare all you want, you can make the perfect decisions, but at the end of the day, so much of success is something you can't control. And Esther, she did not control chapter 6 to happen. She couldn't have known that the king would be sleepless that night and ask somebody to come and read the Chronicles and be reminded of this man who saved him from an assassination attempt and somehow what? Reward him. But that's the setup. And it was perfect. Had she asked from the king of what she wanted before this chapter 6, and it would have just happened. And Mordecai might not have been where he needed to be to actually, you'll see in the conclusion, to have the power he had to have. But it just so happened that she waited, and this happened, and now the king's favor towards her and her people are primed and ready. So that she's about to ask for her people's salvation, and the king is what? More um, his heart is more pleasantly positioned for this. Okay, has to happen. Okay, moving on to the next movement. What happens is she eventually wins, right? The king comes over and says, "What do you want?" And this is the third time he asks, and she says, "Let my life be granted me and my people, for we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed." So the third time when she says that, the king erupts. He gets pissed off. She says, "Who is he? Where is he? Who is trying to kill me?" Right? I mean, kill you. What's really interesting here is that Hammond is at the dinner here. And prior to being at this dinner, Hammond is getting dressed to go to this dinner. And his wife, his silent co-founder, right, and his group of advisors say something truthful to him. And it says, um, if Mordecai, as Zeresh's wife says this, before whom you have begun to fall is of the Jewish people, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. This is Esther chapter 6, verse 13. So before the third dinner, um, Haman's wife, Zeresh, says something very truthful. Remember, she's the woman that misled him, say, like, build this tall, I believe it was 75 foot pole to hang Mordecai, right? She's the one that gave that ridiculous advice, but now she's saying, hey, you know what? Be careful. You won't overcome Mordecai if this is the case. And Haman, before he can really consider, like he gets this warning, before he gets this warning and he can consider what to do about this advice, he gets hurried over to the dinner. And that's the kind of tragedy here, right? Haman, he could have spared himself, I think. But no, he had no time to make that decision. He goes to dinner. King erupts. The king storms out to the garden to get himself under control. But when he comes back in, Hammond, because he knows his life is in danger, is prostrated um, himself to Esther, who's on the couch, right? And she's reclining, but he's begging for his life. The king comes back in, witnesses this, and gets even more pissed off. And he claims that it's because Hammond is trying to make a move on Esther. So here's a king pissed off at this guy, goes out to cool himself off, comes back in and sees the guy he's pissed off at making a move on his wife. So now he's had it, right? We don't know if that's actually what happened. I mean, he says that Hammond was making a move, or maybe it was just the reason he wanted to give to kill him even further. But who knows? And so conveniently, so have it when he's like, "I'm going to kill you now," and somebody in the court says, "Oh, there's a 75-foot pole," and so there is that sweet poetic justice where Hammond created his own grave, like he's dug his own grave, or in this case, Hammond built the pole that he's going to hang on himself. Now, power transfers. The king gives Haman's ring, the signet ring, to Mordecai. And Mordecai has now the power to write new laws. That's what happens here. And I'm going to talk about this because this is very, very important. I think it's the most important point as founders that we need to take note of from this book. Um, Mordecai writes the following law. It's chapter 8, verse 11. If you'll turn to chapter 8, verse 11 with me. The Jews may gather and defend themselves against anyone who attacks them and to plunder their goods. To plunder their goods. So the Jews to this point couldn't defend themselves, but he writes it into the law that they can defend themselves and kill people who try to attack them. So it's a self-defense thing. And then he adds, and plunder their goods. If you attack me and I defend myself, I can plunder your goods. That's written in there. Now I want to be straight with you about something. There's no reason to kind of soften this and sand this down. And look, this is a very warlike statement, right? It's framed as self-defense, but thousands of people die, and the book doesn't flinch about it, right? Thousands of people die from this because the people who were trying to attack, like Haman and his crew, are all killed, right? The Jews kill them. But watch what the narrative says after that. That's what's kind of amazing here. Is that verse 16. Okay, so if you look at chapter 9, verse 10, verse 15, and verse 16, the story stops dead to report this, okay? But they laid no hand on the plunder. So they kill the people who try to kill them, but they don't touch any of the riches and plunders. Why is this important? Is if you look actually prior, um, 600 years earlier, so Saul, the Benjaminite, okay? And Mordecai is also a Benjaminite. So earlier, 600 years earlier, Saul attacks the Amalekites and he fails. Why does he fail? He destroys them, and then what does he do? He takes the spoils. He not only kills them, but he takes the spoils. And that's the failure that cost Saul his kingdom, right? Look, you win. You won, but you go even further. You go more than you needed to. That's what Saul did. Now, 600 years later, what does Mordecai do? Same family, right? Same test. They prevail against their enemy, but they don't touch the spoils. Look, going beyond right and wrong and morality here. Why this is important to founders is after you win, after you fundraise or after you acquire your competitors or after you hit your revenue goals, the test is the 90 days after you win. It's what you do with the leverage when the other side finally can't hurt you. The employee who burned you, the investors who passed rudely and now needs you in the next round. This will always happen. And I think the extractive, exploitative view of business is you've hurt me in the past, so I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to even go further. You hit me once, I'm going to come back to you with 1,000 lashes to get back at you. I've heard that many, many times from many business people. They almost embrace that kind of mantra as though it is strength. It's a flex that I don't let people mess with me. I don't let people screw with me. But revenge doesn't end with you guys. This is something that's very short-sighted about it, like a lot of business people who have that mentality. They don't know that they're cursing themselves. When you have that attitude of you didn't do good to me, so I will pay you back and then some more, you're you've taken something and you've cursed your children. They will inherit the counterclaim. You don't settle the score. You just moved it, right? Down a generation. And they're going to pay the bill. I think we forget that. And that's perhaps one of the biggest lessons from scripture in general, from the oldest playbook is I think a lot of people, whether they're warriors, because business has that analogy of battle, we tend to think as though our life, our experience, our venture is the be all end all, and it's everything. But we're like a speck in the eternal timeline and in the expanse of the universe. We're like a speck. And I don't know, for those of you who have children, and maybe you don't have children, either way, it's very short-sighted thinking to think that what you do stops with you. Karma, whether you believe it or not, is a biatch, they say, right? Excuse my French. Um, it comes back around, is what Buddhist philosophy teaches. And this is essentially what we see again here. we see that there's a timeline and forgiveness is strong. Um, Forgiveness doesn't mean you're turning the other cheek and then like letting them like just destroy you. It never says let them destroy you, right? It does say, however, that justice comes from somewhere else. You don't have to deliver it. And the oldest playbook does say, don't go up beyond what you need to take people's plunders. And I think that's important in business too, guys. Okay, Mordecai sought the welfare of the city. He sought the peace and welfare of the city, and that's where the book ends. It says he sought the welfare of his people, and he spoke peace to all his people. That's the exit line for the most powerful man, the most powerful Jew in the ancient world at the time of Persia. And so they invent a holiday around him called Purim, right? All right, guys. I've talked at you for some time now, but I want to end with two questions, okay? So question number one, what are you about to ask for while the room is still excited? Next time you talk to an investor or a client and they're very excited, what are you about to ask? What's your call to action? Think about it. Read the person, not the room, right? So it's because they say, hey, so can I buy this? That might be a sign to yes, here's the price. Or it might be better to say, but wait, come to dinner, right? Second question. This is the one I'd actually write down, guys. This is an important one. When you win, not if you win, but when you win, because we will all win. You'll survive, you will win. What are you not going to take, right? The road to victory, there will be some pains, there will be some scars. What will you not take? Will you not take revenge? Will you not take eye for an eye, right? Do you have that ability? I think that's important too. Um, I do want to say this. Some of the best businessmen I know are not, they don't have that exploitative mindset. They have an abundant mindset. And I think that's what we're trying to get at today. I hope that was helpful, guys. Thank you, everyone, for today. I am going to open up the Zoom room, our inner backstage council, where we can talk a little bit more about what we just talked about. I will put the Zoom link into LinkedIn, and I'll see you guys there. All right. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this was helpful. Bless you all.